Everybody, and welcome to the August 30th Verona Public School Board of Education meeting. We are calling the meeting to order. It is 7:13. And if everybody will please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The reading of the meeting notice. This meeting is being conducted in compliance with the open meeting session that the Verona Board of Education passed a resolution at its annual reorganization meeting held on January 4th, 2022. The meeting set forth the schedule of its regular meetings, which resolution was within 7 days of passage. The schedule was sent to the Verona Cedar Grove Times, the Star Ledger, the Township of Verona, and the VEA. Postings of this meeting setting forth the time, location, and agenda were posted at the Verona Board of Education office and on the Verona Public Schools District website. The Verona Board of Education operates under a consent agenda format. Any board member has the right to have an item pulled to be voted upon or discussed separately. Copies of tonight's agenda and resolution have been made available to the public and the press. Mr. Cruz, roll call for attendance, please.
Sure. Mr. Walker. Mr. Day,
Here.
Mrs. Drappi,
Here.
Mrs. Prisco,
Here.
and Mrs. Freshy.
Here.
We have quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to jump right into our presentations this evening. We have a couple of presentations, and first we have our Director of Facilities, Mr. Natural, and then we have following him, Jody Shipper from Grand River Solutions. So Mr. Natural, welcome. I hope your summer's going well.
So I'm going to present to you a couple of the 2022 summer projects that were completed over the last couple of months. So we have the HVAC. Before getting here, you guys had that big referendum with all the HVAC upgrades. So there were a couple loose ends that got finalized over the course of the summer. At startup, there were some deficiencies that were discovered. Between all the entities that were involved with the project, they came into the district. We had everything addressed, and then the borough building department came in and they started doing all the final inspections, and little by little we're closing all that out. But all of the open work was completed. At FN, on the left side of the building, when you're standing at the street, it was just dirt. It was unfinished area. So we designed and built a project to have a sidewalk that went from the street all the way to the macadam area in the back. There was also an existing sidewalk with steps, and we tied the new sidewalk at both locations. Some additional grading was done, and this helps to keep rainwater from washing into the building, to help keep the water from entering into the building. We also installed some retaining walls, and there was a drainage inlet that was installed at the base of one of the retaining walls at the bottom of the sidewalk. So any water that's coming down the hill will find its way into that retention basin and go into the underground drainage. So stormwater management, I know that was a big thing in Verona. Historically, there's been a few buildings that have run into some flooding issues. We brought a company in. They jetted all the lines. They vacuumed all the debris out of all the lines and all the catch basins, and then they videoed all the lines. When they ran the video, they were actually able to determine the depth and any deficiencies within the underground pipes, and they marked it on the asphalt. So we documented all this information on Google Earth images and on floor plans of the buildings. I started to collaborate with Chuck from the DPW. And we've been meeting with some contractors. We're creating a scope of work in all these identified areas throughout the district. We had the lines cameraed. We're getting proposals to do all the repairs. And essentially what's going to happen is the asphalt has to come up in little areas. Sometimes it's just a rock, sometimes it's just a little crack, but you have to disturb the earth, expose that, make the repair and put everything back. But all those conversations started, and we're hoping to have final proposals in the coming weeks. Sure, if you have a question, go for it. Typically, no. Yeah, typically, like inside of a building would have to like be a broken pipe as a result of like an act of God or something like that. But in this situation, I've never run into it where it has, unfortunately. So just some general maintenance things. I mean, I think the custodial team and the maintenance team in-house, they did a phenomenal job of doing all the summer cleaning. I mean, the guys go in and they really take a lot of pride in what they do, and empty all the classrooms out, and they strip all the floors and re-wax everything and make sure they're disinfecting, they're changing air filters. I mean, these are all just general things that they do every summer. But in addition to that, they went around and the various classrooms throughout the district were painted. Some hallways were painted. One of the school entrances, like the front steps, the sides of the steps, and the whole archway, that was painted. So it was really good to be able to stay on top of all the work that they already do with summer cleaning and get some of this additional stuff done. There were a lot of hazardous trees, unfortunately, like the spotted lantern flies and some fungus goes around and it takes out the trees. So we identified that, got some contractors, got competitive bids, had them come in and made sure we got that taken care of during the summer, so it didn't impact school or recess or anything like that. Also the HVAC, I mean, as I said earlier, they go in, they do filters, but the HVAC technician that we have in-house, he does a wonderful job. And as he's going around changing the filters, we do other preventative maintenance measures. He checks the belts, some exhaust fans or supply fans, things like that. When we identify those issues, he sees to it that it gets fixed. Also the lockdown shades. So that was ordered at the end of last school year. It came at the start of the summer, and the maintenance guys went around and they installed the lockdown shades throughout the district. So as the staff members are coming back, all that's already in place. Landscape upgrades. So throughout the district, just kind of, when I first got here, there was a couple areas that I felt needed to be addressed. A couple of the schools just required some sprucing up of, just as simple as adding additional mulch, things like that. A couple other buildings, unfortunately, there's just like a lot of dead shrubs and things like that. So we collaborated. We worked both with in-house staff and competitive quotes from contractors and DPW being able to dump debris at their site. And we built these projects, and they came in and ripped out all the dead stuff, planted new stuff. We mulched. And then actually even all the new stuff, there's like these Bluetooth timers with slow drip water. So we're not just planning these new things and then relying on the rain that never comes to keep them alive. So we have solutions in place so that this way, you know, the investment that we're making is good. What I do here, LTO. So the big thing this summer was probably the HB Whitehorn STEM Lab. As this picture right here is a before picture. So all the furniture was removed and disposed of. The old concrete flooring was all chipped up and peeling. So that was stripped. A brand new Ardex concrete floor was installed. There was a partition wall. You can kind of see it in the back there, kind of separated where they used to store the wood when it was a wood shop years ago. So that wall was actually knocked down. And then the whole entire space was opened up. All the walls were painted. And all the sills and the trim, new base molding was installed. I mean, it was a full renovation of the entire space. Really, it was a collaboration of the contractor. We had to outsource the concrete floor, but all of the other work was actually done in-house. So it was another additional thing that the in-house maintenance staff did, and I think they did a wonderful job. They came in, they really dedicated some time and cleaned that space up and painted it. So you can see another before picture. This is what you're back to that partition wall, and then you got this video right here shows you the finished product. That's where that wall was right there. Really open that space back there. No. There's a way, yeah, from outside. Yeah. Well, actually, also there is a chairlift in the music room, which is right next door. Yeah, it's like a platform chairlift. Yeah. So you go down that chairlift, and then those two rooms interconnect to like a little hallway. Correct. Any other questions? So that's the end of the slideshow. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. All right. Have a good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jody Shipper. I am with Grand River Solutions. It is my great privilege to be here to talk about the report that I have produced for the Verona schools. And I am going to launch in first. Let's see, is it going to pick up? Oh, there's a lag. Just a moment. Okay. Going to start talking about very specifically what we were asked to do. So the task that was first given to us as part of the request for proposals was that we provide an evaluation and feedback and recommendations on school climate and culture and hiring, recruitment, and retention of teachers and staff. As part of that work, as many of you are aware, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with several of you here tonight and with many of the school staff, we reviewed documents. I have an entire list, but it's going to take a long time. So I was going to run through that. If the board has questions about exactly what was provided, I'm happy to go through that. The results of a climate survey, interviews, multiple meetings with the diversity committee, subcommittees, and a number of emails and calls also received from members of the broader community. Generally, when it comes to climate, the concerns raised with me centered around people who felt comfortable participating in academic life in the district, safety, classroom treatment, and their involvement in school activities and access to and ability to be involved. The concerns that were raised are then reflected here in a number of suggestions that are made. These are not musts. This is not an audience. I want to an audit. Rather, I want to remind everyone here, this is not a must do. This is not a compliance review. These are simply suggestions for the board's consideration as to ways they might address those things that were raised while I was both out here and in the documents and in other communications. A number of those centered on classroom management. This is not to suggest that teachers don't have classroom management skills, but both students and teachers recognize that there are times when it was difficult to manage certain classroom discussions. Some students reported feeling left out of discussions. Other reported hearing slurs directed at them and around them. And some teachers shared that they themselves were uncomfortable and not clear how best to manage some of those conversations. And we don't want our teachers to feel uncomfortable in the classroom. As a result, one recommendation is to consider some advanced training on classroom management to help teachers make some decisions on how to manage this and to bring some consistency to the way that different teachers are handling discussions. When is it appropriate to shut a discussion down? When is it appropriate to loop back? When is it a disciplinary issue? When is it not? One thing that a number of individuals raised with me was the idea of content warnings and whether they should be given. I want to make clear this is not about a trigger warning, and this is not to suggest that people should not participate in classroom discussions or that there should be discussions or topics that teachers have to change what they're saying. But when should there be advanced warning to students and their parents about some of the content that might be discussed so that a student who is uncomfortable can talk to their parents about how they, the student, might manage the classroom discussion or their feelings about some topic that is being discussed. I think it's really important to recognize that we never know which topic is going to potentially upset which student. And so this is not to say that there needs to be specific rules on specific topics, but a much broader in-depth discussion about when is it appropriate and when not, so that there can be some added consistency and to increase teachers' comfort in bringing up some topics, and so that students are better able to engage and learn. Some of the other, I'm sorry, there's a little lag here, is it? There. We go. Some of the other topics that were raised to me have to do with parents who talked about their children who have hidden or non-visible disabilities, and also students themselves who express concerns. Sometimes it's something as simple as language choice, that someone was using maybe another student, certainly teaching staff or other staff. And so some teaching practices, again, advanced training for those teachers on ways to best work with students who have hidden or otherwise non-visible disabilities. Also, one of the things that was brought to my attention is that there, and again, this is all based on information that was shared with me. I am not saying there were Title IX violations. For those who don't know, Title IX is the federal law that regulates harassment and discrimination relating to sex or gender, but there were a number of incidents shared with me, both by staff and teachers and students, that could have and probably should have at least been reviewed using a Title IX lens to ensure that if it had in fact fallen under Title IX, that it would have been addressed properly. Title IX has so many myriad complex rules, and it is so important that everyone understand that there are certain requirements that have to happen the minute somebody says, I believe I was treated differently because of sex or gender, before you even get to the possibility of whether or not there should be an investigation. And so to make sure that people are aware of proper protocols, the myriad things that you could say and the myriad things you have to not say ever. And so again, some training on those topics. Other topics that came up through this review as areas for potential insight and oversight from the board, and as areas where you might do further inquiry. There were a large number of students, and this was also reflected in the climate survey that we did, who do not really understand what people think they understand. Yes, you have processes in place, you have people in place to investigate, but they are still not understanding that certain things that fall under HIB, they all say HIB, but very few know what it means. They toss it off as if it's commonly understood. So a better understanding of what it is and where to report. There was, granted, the survey size was not overwhelmingly large, but we did have a larger number of students than I would have expected who said they did not know where to go to make a report. So reminders. Also a reminder that training on these topics is very much like the bottle of Tylenol. We cannot give anyone the entire bottle of Tylenol in August and presume that they have all of the protection and knowledge they need in March. We dose it out, especially in middle school and high school students, in an age appropriate small dose manner is always most effective. One thing that became clear here is the number of students who would like to know the outcome of their cases and do not know. Parents are informed. We don't know that parents are actually communicating fully with their students the outcome. This is not to say that only the student is involved, although there is an increasing movement throughout high schools, not middle school and elementary, but through high schools, to include the students more and more so that they can have some agency and autonomy and start to understand their role in this. Again, not having them put on a case or defend themselves, but some additional involvement in understanding the outcome. And the other piece that became interesting to me was this idea of making sure that we know, that the school knows what really does need to be investigated. And in doing a very brief review, again, this was not a compliance review or audit, there's some cases that potentially did not need to go forward to a HIB investigation. And those require a difficult conversation at the beginning. This does not meet our definition. Even if everything you are telling me is true, this does not fall under HIB. And here is why, so that it can be educative. This doesn't mean you do nothing. It's still, any school can still have a conversation, an educational or preventive conversation with the other student, but to make sure that it is really used in a meaningful way when the allegations, if true, would be a violation of the HIB policies. Other recommendations involve the use of guidance counselors as investigators, which would be a practice I recommend be avoided when possible. Using more neutral language, there were a number of individuals who talked about perps and perpetrators and aggressors. This is something that can really sort of color the atmosphere and impact the climate, especially as these are young people who haven't been found responsible for some wrong. So to consider district-wide what language would be more appropriate in referring to students. Conflict resolution program, I understand there was a very successful one here. A number of individuals talked about how much they liked that and wish it or some form would come back. And I have a very strong recommendation that the board consider learning more about restorative justice so that the board can determine whether or not that is a practice that could or should be woven into its practices in terms of prevention, education, and in terms of sanctioning. Some additional steps to consider: people first language instead of a disabled student, a student with a disability. We center the person first. These are small things, but they have a very big impact on the way people look at and treat each other. Staff transitions was a big topic that came up again and again from students. I am certainly not suggesting that all personnel records be shared with everyone in the district. That is absolutely, there's privacy laws and myriad reasons why that shouldn't happen. But the students here, especially high school students, are particularly bright, and they do what people do. They fill in when there is missing information. Sometimes they were remarkably accurate with their guesses of what had occurred, although they may have ascribed different rationale for things that happened. Sometimes they were very incorrect in their certainty of what had happened, but that becomes the narrative, which in turn impacts the climate in which so many students are functioning. So to find some communications strategy that the board and the district would be comfortable with to assist with helping to make sure that some kind of information does in fact get out that is appropriate and age appropriate and can do perhaps something to quell that very the noisy and effective in its own way rumor mill. And so social media, I was quite surprised by the 13-year-olds on TikTok in the district and sharing what they've seen and what they've heard. I know I'm a parent also. Not every parent can be everywhere at all times. But some of those images that are out there and ideas that are out there are powerful and damaging. And those kids bring it to school and they share, if not the actual video with their friends, they share those messages. And so, you know, any additional training that can be done for your broader community and parents and guardians about tips and things that they might do to help avoid that, I think goes a long way to impacting the climate in the hallways and in the classrooms and at lunch. And then also to think about continued use of libraries. Certainly the first meetings that we held with the diversity subcommittees and the number of individuals who talked about the learning that takes place through displays is an excellent place to be really thoughtful. And I heard a lot of that from a number of librarians who attended those meetings. Couple other suggestions have to do with discipline. More and more schools are finding it really interesting to track not just suspension, but class out of time, time out of class, excuse me. to assess the impact of that. Is there a student who just needs to be called down to the office a lot? That is time out of class. What's going on there? And often find that by tracking that, not 1 week, not 1 month, and not even 1 academic year can be enough, but over time to get a picture. There are some who are just eager for attention, and they know that by acting up just a little bit, that will in fact get them some of that attention, and it gives the school an opportunity to also have a conversation, what's going on here, and to take a look. So that data can be really important to maintain, and more schools we're finding as they use that are learning things about the impact of that time out of class. A number of schools are maintaining data on disciplinary referrals that includes the name of the teacher, which teacher made the disciplinary referral. I know, and you all know, that any one class of students, 1 year, that 7th grade or 5th grade, can be absolutely wild, and every teacher has their hands full. These things happen, but over time, it can also suggest to us that perhaps that teacher could use a little bit more advanced training on classroom management, so that the answer isn't always to pull a student or students out of class when they are then learning less. Again, learning about restorative justice and reassessing practices on discipline. There were a number of instances when I asked about what measures are used. I was specifically asking in relation to HIB cases, but students who are in detention again and again, if it is not working, that means that they are doing something that has landed them in detention, but whatever measures are being used, the detention alone is not working. What else would? Is it a conversation? Is it education? Is it something more? So the more data you have, the more you look at the data, obviously the smarter you can all get in terms of making decisions about the practices you wish to enact going forward. Also, in terms of curriculum, a number of parents, we talked about this at some meetings, a number of people also reached out to me directly, parents in the community, to be considering multiple paths for student success that include vocational educational programs, that four-year college isn't for every student, and that vocational paths not be seen as lesser. It is a different path. It is a viable path. It can certainly be a path to a very healthy salary beyond that which someone going to a four-year college might be earning. And it can be a path to great career satisfaction. So these are all reasons for not only the inclusiveness of a practice like that, but the reality of a practice like that is that the more paths we have for student success that are all seen as equally valid and viable, the more that different students with different needs and interests and abilities can all feel that they are leaving equipped for a path to success. And also, I know some of this is done, but to consider additional competency-based rubrics rather than just seat time. I know that there is already some of this in elementary school, but the more the better. These competency-based rubrics have really been shown to be so helpful, not just in a diversity sense of aiding any one particular group of students, but across the board. There's always a pause when I hit the button here. There we go. Also want to talk about training for students. The number of students who talk to me about reporting, we've talked about that. Students who talked about if you see something, say something is what they were, told, but they didn't know which something was the something that they needed to say something about. And so to really be able to give them the tools to recognize these things are examples, for example, of bullying. These things are example when we have bullying on the basis of what kind of person you are, we sometimes call that harassment. And that is also something that you should report. If a friend of yours feels unsafe at school, these are the things. I know there is some of this, but based on the number of students who shared to me their confusion over this, I think more is a possible suggestion. Consent training. I know that people often think if we're talking about consent training, that I am at the same time suggesting that students should be taught to consent to sex, and that is not what I mean by that. This has to do with bodily autonomy and teaching them to set them up for success later in life. Things like when you plop down in somebody's lap, when you're playing with somebody's hair and maybe they don't like that, and that you yourself, if you have a friend who's always hanging on you and hugging you and you don't like that, how to reply, and goes back to the old keeping hands to oneself. And it can be framed as giving permission, and it is not always about sex or any training like that. Certainly, by the time they're juniors and seniors, in an age-appropriate way, that can be woven into the curriculum. And they will absolutely be learning that in college, but we want everyone to learn that far before they're getting off to college, university, or vocational school, or the workplace. Sure, the hiring process is prompt and timely, so that if there is someone interviewed, that process or a number of people interviewed is moving along quickly to make sure, or as quickly as is reasonable, that you're not losing fabulous candidates who are swooped up elsewhere. Job fairs, attending them, there has been some of that, but these are all ways to make sure that you're able to really cast the net as widely as possible in order to get in really the very best teachers. In the end, this is not to say you don't have the very best teachers, but as there are more and more openings over time, as people retire or leave for other reasons, you really want to make sure that you have a sound process in place. There are myriad ways of conducting a self-audit. Might consider once a year, once every other year, once every 3 years, depending on how the hiring and how many positions, but to make sure that there is a sound and consistent process and that people are actually putting the data back into the system of record. In terms of retention, certainly increasing diversity will be a challenge that goes to both hiring and retention. You don't have lots of openings. It's not one of those school districts that is so large that you're not looking for 100 teachers every year, and that's a good thing that you don't have a lot of consistent openings. But to think about ways also that you can help your teaching, those who are newer and coming in to really want to stay. And also those who are excellent and who may get an offer elsewhere, and you know, financially not every district can match every other district's resources. Formal mentorship programs for more senior teachers is a great way to keep them. Maybe it involves a small amount of pay to them. It also enables newer teaching staff to know that they too themselves may become eligible to be part of that mentorship program with standards and an application to it, so that it's not just have lunch with somebody once in a while, but really something meaningful that people can aspire to and increase their feeling of connectedness. Affinity groups for teachers who may belong to groups based on race or culture, could even be religion, who are not well represented within the school district, to reach out to other school districts nearby, find out if they have affinity groups that some teachers might consider joining as a resource to those teachers who aren't feeling connected for whatever reason. Certainly to make sure people, especially good teachers and staff, you want to keep them, but for all newer teachers, especially ongoing consistent feedback throughout the year. No one, as you all know, should be getting any surprise on an end of the year evaluation. It should always be information that they know and they knew was coming because they've been hearing it throughout the year. And certainly you might consider ongoing climate surveys, whether you do it once a year, every other year, every 3 years, but on some ongoing basis, so that if there is interesting data, it gives you an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper and ask additional questions to see what's going on. That is the end of my presentation, and I'm going to wait for the board to take seats.
So Mrs. Shipper, thank you for a really comprehensive report. We have some more detail here. The board received everything. We've been reading through it. And I do think that there are some questions that are going to come out of the board. So I'm going to open it up to the board members first for any questions. Yeah, we could kind of start with Mr. Waka.
I'll just kind of go in order that you had posted in your presentation. So I think the Title IX updates are a very sound idea. You know, it's quite comprehensive how much is needed and included with Title IX. And if a claim's mentioned against your district, you know, what's going to happen is then the Title IX attorneys, their mediators are going to work with the district. And if you still can't find the resolution, then you get a Title IX audit. And professionally speaking, that was and I won, but it was the hardest thing I've ever had to go through in my career. as far as just the amount of work that's to be done. So I'd like to see the district not be in that position. I think that you talked about the HIB. I think that it's accurate to say that the spirit of the HIB laws are well intentioned, but I think there's a huge disparity between what people's perception is of HIB versus what the reality is, because it's a lot like just affirmative action, but for students. And I think a lot of people don't know the connotation versus denotation of how the law is, actually written. So I do agree that it could only benefit every single stakeholder in the district to receive that training. We talked about social media training. I think that's also wise. I think that we all know adults who have difficulty handling social media. So why wouldn't students? And I think one of the flaws of, or maybe maybe not flaw, but a reality of what's happening is I think a lot of kids are associating their self-worth with the number of followers they have or the number of likes they have, and that's not their self-worth. But we got to make that clear. I think that when you spoke of consent training, I think it's really, really important that if this district wants to go and make sure that we get these kids the training, that it's school wide. I don't want any particular subgroup to be just kind of identified as you're more likely to be an aggressor because you do this or you do that, or you're part of this group. That where nationally there might be some kind of data to show you might be more likely, but we're a small school, so if we're going to do that, I'd want all the students to receive it, and we're small enough to do it for every student. So that's something I would recommend, that if we go that route, we do that. You spoke of discipline, and the one thing I think is important to mention is that you'd stated that like in middle school, too many people, can be parents anecdotally or kids thought they were getting too much detention. But I think in order for the district to make any changes based on that, we have to know how many kids got detention for a particular transgression and how many kids got a second detention for the same transgression later in the year. Because then we'll know because the discipline could have worked, right? And we don't want to reinvent the wheel, because just the law of unintended consequences, we might be going the wrong direction if we fix something that's not broken. And I also think too, with discipline, like it's so easy to look at what parts of a discipline don't work. But we also have to look what part of discipline is working and working well, because that's also a big part of it. So if it's not broken, I don't want to spend, I recommend this district not go too crazy into fixing something that's not broke. You spoke about bystander training, and I think, bystanders being supportive after the fact, that's something that I think is a healthy practice. But I think we should just be clear that bystanders aren't under any obligation to involve themselves in a situation that may very well be emotionally charged. And if a student's walking into an altercation halfway through and it doesn't have all the facts, it's possible they could make the situation worse. So I think we should be very cautious with that. With the retention and the hiring, the only thing I think as a board member is, I imagine, I'm pretty sure that the district's doing exit interviews, but I don't believe this board gets a summation of exit interview data at the end of every year. And I think that's another big part of it that's not on there, because the fact of the matter is that if a teacher's on between step 1 and step 5 of any salary guide in New Jersey right now, they can make more money if they look to go elsewhere. That's just the reality right now. And what we really need to see is staff that are leaving vertically, whether it's to make more money somewhere else or to become a supervisor, an assistant principal, or something like that. That would be a sign that we're developing leaders, and that might be something that's good. We should be proud of. It's the ones that are leaving horizontally for equal amounts of money, or perhaps even lesser money. That's another piece of data that I think we need to see. But I think that the suggestions that you made are fair, and these are just recommendations, like you'd said, and I'm interested to see which recommendations that eventually the superintendent would like to move forward with.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Mr. Day?
We were asking questions. You gave a statement.
I finished second place in an election, so I get to say whatever I want.
Okay. I want to thank you for your presentation, Mr. Shipper. And a couple of questions I had. I guess one of them was about the sample size. I know it was smaller than you mentioned, smaller than expected. It was 158 students, 95 administrators, and what's the normal range? I know, because that's pretty much 1/3 of our teaching staff, our administration, and 20% of our student population in that age range.
So for people who study surveys, climate surveys like this, they would tell you anything over 18% is valid. You know, some people might say 17, 19, but that's, you know, just sort of a number that's bandied about by the social scientists who study these things. Normally, we would have liked to have seen greater participation. Absolutely. I think if you were to engage in climate surveys going forward, you would have an opportunity to be really planful and to think ahead. When is it going to be most convenient to reach out to the seniors or to reach out to the juniors, and think ahead so that you know when to reach them. You might leave it open for a much longer period of time. I also recognize we were coming up against the end of the academic year. And so the time that it was open was a little shorter. Often these are left open for a month. And there are sometimes campaigns and poster campaigns. Some do incentivize participation. I'm not an advocate, but some do. You know, if you participate, your name goes into a hat and you can win a Starbucks card. Some people like to do that. Want to make sure that, you know, there's myriad rules, and I'm not suggesting it at all. But there are ways people try to get more participation. But one thing that we didn't have the option to do, and the most common successful route to greater participation would have been if we could have left it open, but the school year was upon us.
Yeah, I know it was opt-in. So a couple other things real quick. I did like your points about classroom management. I know that's always a challenge for teachers and things that happen in the classroom. I've had 2 kids, just my daughter graduated high school now, and I always share some good stories, and I'm like, yeah, that really happened. And you know, so I know with the teachers, there's a lot of things that, you know, any additional training on that would be beneficial. And you did mention some, I guess, restorative justice. How do you define that? Because I know you mentioned that in your recommendation a couple of times, and I was just curious about, you know, how you position that.
So restorative justice is a very specific skill and practice. It's not something one can just try out. And it is a practice. It is used extensively in some of the Scandinavian countries and in Australia and New Zealand. And it's a practice by which someone who is alleged to have engaged in wrongdoing acknowledges the harm to the community and works to repair the harm that they have done. So this is obviously not suitable in every case, but it is an acknowledgement and a learning process. And people who do this, you don't take a 2-hour webinar and become skilled at this. There's people who take classes that can, you know, take many weeks and months often, to really learn these skills to help them not be shamed. The idea is that they will then grow and contribute to the betterment of their school or workplace environment because they're helping to restore. And so it is really important that it not be done by someone trying to coerce, for example, you know, you did it sort of a thing, and that it not then be used against them, because then that's really compounds the wrong, and it is not the aim of the practice. So it is a very specific practice that people can engage in, really designed to restore the harm done. It's as if there was a little rip to the fabric of the community, and this is a way they can help stitch or mend up that little bit of harm that they themselves may have participated in. It's been proven very powerful. I was just reading about a police up in Massachusetts in a high school criminal case, ended up working with a practitioner and the school district, and they resolved the criminal case and the school's case, which boggles the mind to me. I need, you know, how they would do that, but it's very powerful when used well. And it focuses on both restoration and learning on the part of the person who engaged in that misconduct, so that they aren't going to be ashamed or scared off, but they will have learned about the impact and help convince others not to do that in the future. So I think I went on too long, but I'm a big fan of the practice, in case you can't tell.
Yeah, I can tell you like that one. So, okay, very good. Well, thank you very much for the answers there. And I will yield the floor to Mrs. Drappi.
Sorry. Thank you so much for your presentation and all the documentation you have given to us in advance to look at. I want to echo Mr. Day's sentiments about restorative justice. It's something that I mentioned, I think, maybe at my first or second meeting as a board member, something that I wanted to pursue as a board member for our district. It has proven in those studies and in those cases, as you mentioned, to be highly, highly effective, especially in cases of racism and bigotry. It's an educational experience rather than a consequence, and it has tremendous power to affect change rather than a slap on the wrist. I agree with your evaluation of our HIB process and agree that it needs a significant overhaul. I think, any professional development that we can provide for teachers to have unpracticed conversations in the classroom, it is essential. And I think, a lot of our teachers happen to be very good at it already and are trying. But I think to have consistency across the board, I agree with you wholeheartedly. A couple concerns that I had within the report itself. The word tolerance is used on the first page of the report that you gave us. And tolerance is, I have to tolerate my 7-year-old. Mom, I tolerate that because she's 7. She doesn't, she's just trying to get my attention, right? But I don't like it, but I tolerate it. Whereas the word tolerance in this report, I don't believe belongs in any case, in any facet. It has a negative connotation, and we're not asking folks to tolerate others based on race, gender, sexual orientation, religion. We're asking them to be accepted. So I would just ask that word is removed altogether. I'm sorry, I'm just going through my notes here.
And if I could just respond,
Yes, please.
there are myriad ways to think of tolerance. I think of it as something very powerful. There's a reason the Holocaust Museum is called the Museum of Tolerance. Tolerance is powerful because it also involves not just putting up with, but being willing to see as equal and to see as valued and to see as valuable and to be willing to lift up even when they are not one of yours. So I appreciate that some people tolerate comments from people that we don't want to put up with. I think there's different interpretations.
Okay, I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think what you defined was the word acceptance is, an empathetic, in an empathetic manner. Let me see here. I'm sorry. I have, everything's digital. I didn't print anything out. Restorative justice, I touched upon that. And I know just in looking at my notes and speaking to the board, I know we talked about the Positive Coaching Alliance training. And I don't think we ever actually got to that, but I would really like to see that become part of sort of an overarching, athletic piece. And then I only have 1 or 2 more. I'm sorry, I don't want to take up everybody's time here. In terms of echoing Mr. Waka talking about training, social media training, that's been brought up many times at board meetings, and it's by members of the public, and it's never ever been entertained. People have offered to do it pro bono. Members of the public have offered to do it pro bono, who are experts in their field, who teach these classes, in colleges and in master's programs. And I know the library actually just offered one recently within the past few months, and I believe there were 6 people in attendance. So, I guess all we can do is offer it and try to continue that work. I'm sorry, there's a lag here too. Lots of notes. And I think that might be it. Can you believe it, Mr. Day? I was waiting for him to comment. yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Shipper, for your report and for coming out to us tonight. Just a few things I think everyone before me spoke on, but regarding the social media training, there was definitely a few that were done by our local Verona Police Department numerous times. And unfortunately, like Ms. Drappi said, the attendance is very low. It is a major problem, which I believe, and everybody here probably believes the same, that causes a lot of the issues we are reviewing tonight in this report. And unfortunately, we as parents, educators, we all need to do better educating our children on social media. And where do we start with that? So, if we can't get people to attend a class from the Verona Police Department, I don't know if we're going to do anything better here. It is a possibility, but like I said, I know I've gone to numerous of that before when my children were younger, but it is definitely an issue. And I wish we could get every student in here together and just really focus on just being kind. And I think everything in here really comes down to just being kind. And that's what we really have to start to hit home to everyone, is start being kind to everyone. Like whoever you sit next to, everyone is facing something different. So your report is, very meaningful, and there are great suggestions. The suggestion of social media training, the HIB training, we definitely need to focus in on. Training all of our students, like Mr. Waka said, not just our athletes, but all of our students, to be kind and to, when you see something, say something, no matter who it is, but a kind way about it. And that's what we really, I think, have to focus in on. And let me think, just say students, also the guidance counselors, that's we've had a huge turnover in the high school guidance department, that the students, my child, when he was here, I think he had 5 from the minute he entered 8th grade, 8th grade, when he was getting ready to come in here, a total of 5 throughout his, that's a lot. So we really need to look at that. And vocational programs, another big focus we have to look at, because there are students out there, and I'm going to comment, my son just graduated from Verona High School last June. He is a barber at a local salon here in town, and he's doing extremely well. And I am so proud of him. But to get him through Verona High School was very challenging because there wasn't really much offered for him. So we really need to focus on those students as well. So I appreciate your report and for coming out and applying that to us. Thank you.
And before I turn it over to Ms. Giuseppe, I want to echo a lot of the sentiments. I think your recommendations are excellent, and I'm really looking forward to Dr. Miller and his administrative team to sift through and see what recommendations we're going to move forward on. And I do believe that a lot of these, I don't think anything in here was overly surprising to us, which is good. We were validated. We were kind of, stepping up the right path, and to have your input with survey and input from students and staff really validated some of the things that we thought we were noticing. So we're going to be able to move forward and hopefully elevate ourselves to the next level and continue this work. I think one of the things that Mr. Waka mentioned that is really important is looking at exit interviews, because we have had turnover in staff. I hate to blame everything on pandemic, but it's been a really tumultuous 2 years, and education really took a beating, publicly, personally, and looking at where people are going and why they're going, I think is an excellent way, is to have some summaries maybe at the end of the year of our staff turnover and what caused it, and really work on retention. So I do thank you for the work that you've done for us, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Giuseppe.
Mrs. Shipper, I've not worked with you very long, but it's been an enjoyable process along the way, and it helped me learn a little bit about the Verona schools that I didn't know in the Verona community. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good. I've knowing which of these recommendations the superintendent's going to move forward with, but I would just ask that before we look to explore restorative justice, that we first analyze the data of our current system to see if it's even broken or not before we look to make any changes. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll speak just a moment about staff turnover and exit interviews. It has been my practice in my prior district to conduct an exit interview for everyone that leaves the district. It's very valuable information that you can collect. I also made it a practice to keep a spreadsheet of who left and why. And that way, over a 5-year period, 3-year period, whatever the board would like, you can actually see attrition data. What's your percentage of people that are leaving? But that doesn't tell the whole story as we just discussed. People leave for a variety of reasons. If they're leaving for administrative positions elsewhere, that tells a story about how we're preparing our staff for leadership opportunities. So there's a lot that goes into that, but it's a practice that I'm used to doing and have done in the past, and will obviously continue to do that here. With regard to restorative justice, as Mrs. Shipper said, that's a very specific practice. It's a very involved practice. We should not take it on unless we have significant training for that. But I do want to point out that the HIB policy was updated in May as a result of the state data collection on HIB consequences versus remediation. And for those of you that compared the old policy to the new policy, you'll see that there's a much greater focus on remediation versus consequence. That we need to educate our students educate our students as to how not to continue those behaviors versus just consequencing them for those behaviors. So we had a discussion yesterday among the administrators regarding HIB. Mr. Roberts did a legal training for the administrators on updates to that particular law. And we received some information from the Commissioner of Education regarding some forms that the Commissioner, the Department of Education is providing districts for better reporting capabilities. So I can't speak directly to all of the recommendations that were made, but I will tell you that my first several weeks in the district uncovered some HIB concerns I shared with the board already. So those recommendations are already aligning with what I noticed coming in, and Title IX as well. Title IX is important. It's new to New Jersey with the requirements that school districts have, so it's not unusual that we need to do some training of both staff and students. But that's also, so those are two areas that I think the Grand River Solutions recommendations focused on in a very deep way. And then there's some other things that I'll meet with the DEI committee and Dr. Miller and his team of facilitators, and we'll tease out, what's the priority, and I'll make a recommendation to the board with regard to that. So very quickly, my report tonight just really centers around where we are in the end of the summer, getting ready to start the 22-23 school year, which is just bizarre to say that out loud. But what happens in the summer, in the beginning of the summer, school districts wrap up last year, they make the reports to the Department of Education, they tie up loose ends, and then we focus on going forward. So what happens in the summer? We have people writing curriculum, updating curriculum based on standards, purchasing resources to support those curricula, and preparing to get in everything our teachers need to start the school strong and, ensure a rigorous program of instruction for our students, a rigorous curriculum. In addition to that, we had a great presentation by Mr. Natural tonight. They've done tremendous work on buildings and grounds. The buildings in this community are older. They look beautiful. They're clean. They're ready to go. He should be commended for what he's been able to do since he came on board in April. Was it April? In April. Just a tremendous professional. And the last and most important thing that we do is we staff. So, and staffing, all of the research points to any movement in terms of student outcomes comes specifically from teacher in the classroom and then principal in the building. So staffing is the most important thing we do, and we've been doing it all summer. I'm really happy to say that as of today, and Mrs. Fresky came to our new teacher orientation. We are fully staffed among our teaching, the teaching group. So 3 different groups or 4 different groups of people that work in schools. You have teachers, obviously, other certificated staff members, which are media specialists, nurses, occupational therapists, physical therapists, child study team members, administrators, obviously, and then support staff, which are paraprofessionals, administrative assistants, clerical, custodian, maintenance, et cetera. So right now, our teachers, we are staffed among the teachers. We are staffed among our other certificated staff. We have all of our support staff, with the exception of some paraprofessionals, which is always very difficult to staff. Since the pandemic, it has become increasingly difficult. We're going to be doing some advertising in the community for anyone that's out there that have kids in the district. If they want to work the same hours as their kids are in school, we have opportunities for paraprofessionals and substitute teachers. So that's where we're focusing. With regard to our administrative staff, we are making significant gains toward filling the Director of Special Services position. On tonight's agenda, you're appointing an interim Director of Special Services that has a nice pedigree behind her. And we have second round interviews a week from Thursday for the permanent or the tenure track, I should say, tenure track position. It is a happy problem when you have 4 candidates and any one of them you'd be happy with landing. So the only other thing I wanted to mention is high school sports have begun. And we had Mrs. Palmarezzi brought a group of student leaders today to the Fall Leadership Summit at West Essex High School. They asked each coach to choose 2 student athletes that embody leadership qualities. And there were 300 students at West Essex High School today. Our students that were in attendance, and please forgive me if I mispronounce a name, I'm new to learning some of the names. Sean Steifbolt, Ray Chesney, Kara Dunphy, Shay Haggerty, Chris Caldera, Ian Zelikowitz, Brooke Rendecker, Emily Baumgard, Cassie Colucci, Amelia Nizelek. They were our representatives today at the leadership, and congratulations to them. And we are really excited about next week, about welcoming our students and staff back. And it never feels like a district when no one's here. And it was very quiet this summer. So we're off to the races, people.
Thank you, Ms. Di Giuseppe. And I want to thank you publicly for inviting me to meet the new staff this morning. It's something that was new to me as well. And it was just great to feel the energy in the room and see, it's both nerve-wracking and exciting to be starting a new job, and just to be part of that energy was really nice. And, thank you for that invite. I appreciated that. Following along with our agenda, next is our business administrator report, and that's Mr. Cruz.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I have a few updates in my report tonight. First, I would like to thank all of our staff for all their hard work behind the scenes, especially the buildings and grounds team. As you all heard from Mr. Naturali, the beautification of our district is and ensuring that every single building is addressed and ready and prepped for our staff and students coming back next week. Thank you for raising the bar and continuing setting your the expectations and the standards of excellence. In finance, we have our final June 22nd board secretary, treasurers, and budget transfer report. They're all in agreement. The business office is working diligently and preparing for the 21-22 audit, which will be taking place in the month of October. Most likely the report of that audit will be done in the December board meeting. Free reduced lunch applications for 22-23 was released last week. We encourage all families that qualify to submit an application. It's not just only one of the things I want to highlight is that these applications is not just for free and reduced. It does also support the district for additional funding. One of the things that it benefits the district on is Title I and state funds, and also the E-rate, which benefits technology. And then also on the high school side, it does benefits the students in getting waivers on certain fees. So that's something that definitely want to be mindful and to take advantage of. So Families have until September 30th to apply, and then ongoing enrollment, there's no deadline for the ongoing enrollment after that date. School bus updates. So we finally received our small bus earlier this month. Super exciting. We have our brand new 25 passenger bus. We're awaiting the large bus. We're expecting that large bus to be delivered sometime next week. And that's going to be our 54 passenger gas bus, which is replacing a diesel engine bus that has their, it's already at the 15-year life cycle. So that bus will be no longer taking any student passenger this year. A referendum update, as Mr. Naturale reported, HVAC project is coming to completion. Pretty much it's just the inspection that needs to be passed. One of the things that regarding this referendum, certain units were omitted due to budgetary constraints in the referendum project, specifically here at the high school, or actually all here. So there are some older Univent units here in Verona High School that were not addressed because of the lack of funding. So next month, I'll be giving an update on how we're going to actually utilize the remaining referendum funds and ESSER 3 funding in order to address those units, and also rooftop unit here in this building that needs replacement as well. And lastly, we received a strong response regarding the request for proposal to professional services, which is the architect of record and banking services. We also have another RFP for the legal services that is due tomorrow, August 31st. All three will be evaluated by a committee next month, and will be taking action at the September meeting. This concludes my report for tonight. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you,
Question.
Mr. Cruz.
So-
Questions?
Yeah, so I know, I think a couple months ago, we discussed how we wanted to hire a company to come in and kind of look at all the facilities on campus so that they can present a proposal of, here's the priority that we suggest as an outside objective agency, it's how you should look to improve your facilities. Any update on that?
Yes. So I think I'm going to be stepping on one of the committee's toes with that, but I'll definitely address it. So the outside consultant or provider that we hired is called Office Solutions. They came in, they spent a week here in the district. They evaluated and assessed every single fixed asset, they inventory and tagged the units, and they also are now developing basically a plan, a preventive maintenance plan for the team. So once we have that and the scope, it's going to integrate with the new work order system that we're also implementing this year in October. The team will now have basically up-to-date schedule on preventive maintaining the units. So one of the examples, as Mr. Naturale shared earlier in his presentation, we have an in-house HVAC tech. So with this new system, he's able to kind of scan and really see the actual units and basically parts, et cetera. And he's able to quickly, without exhausting time and effort, he's able to order and really have a calendar and be a little more efficient with his time and the replacement and the work that's needed for each of those units.
Just to make sure I'm clear, so we're just waiting for that official list, I guess, or the priority list to come back, but otherwise, as far as the maintenance, that might have already started happening as far as the scheduling for that.
Yes, so
Okay.
the maintenance is it's already happening. What we're getting from this provider is the full integration of the new software. So what we're waiting for is kind of like the data of that inventory that they took to integrate it with this new platform that we have. So that's really going to tie into everything to kind of like make it function on smoothly.
I got you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
The other part, the most important part of that assessment is there's going to be actually kind of like a long range facility plan where it's going to give us the priorities and things that we need to be aware of. So once we have that, I think we could actually then take a a better look at what our focus should be. Should it be on boilers? Should it be on these big ticket items, or even ESIPs to kind of like address those things going forward in the future? So that's one of the pieces that they're going to actually assess, and then give us also the life cycle of what they believe we should actually start like planning for long term.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Were there any other
I
questions?
just
on
had,
the business
I guess, I just want to say I was very happy that the bus finally came in, because I was tired of hearing about the bus, because it never was coming in. It finally came in. So, and I know the next bus is supposed to come in too. And I know we've had discussions what to do with the old bus. And so potentially we might be able to do something that with the band. Again, it's in discussion, but I just figured I'd throw it out for the rest of the board. Is that, and we have a resource that might be able to use that bus, and as long as it still runs, and, we don't have to worry about the maintenance. But we might be able to work with the band and the band parents on how to best use that bus.
Yeah, so just to add to that's exactly right. The small bus that one is actually getting bidded out or even auctioned out, but the large bus, the discussion with the band and also the principal of Verona High School was to convert that and make it a commercial vehicle. So meaning that large bus will no longer be a school bus.
Mhm.
Seats will be removed, equipment will be taken off. It will need to be painted, so it won't no longer be yellow. So most likely it'll be maroon and white,
Okay.
and et cetera. So the conversation around it is whether to move forward with that, insure it as a commercial vehicle. And then the other part is that, do we have a driver with a CDL license, because you still need a CDL to operate the vehicle.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then I know you pretty much knocked out the finance committee report, which thank you for that. But there were two items that I know we didn't mention, which was the school food services, just the minimal price increase. So there's gonna be minimal price increase there.
Yes,
And then the other item was the non-resident tuition, which was gonna go up 10%
correct.
starting August 30th. So,
Yes,
that's-
so that's correct.
and there's also on September 23rd, the AmeriHealth Health Day. So it's
Yes.
going to be basically screenings and nutrition sessions for the staff. So very exciting stuff. So, and that's the finance committee report along.
So I was
with
going to say,
beforehand.
we're a little out of order.
I'm trying to
so
knock it
that
out.
was
I'm
the-
trying to knock it
We'll
out.
check finance committee report off now. Thank you, Mr. Day. Much appreciated. So since you brought it up, so in regard to a bump in non-resident tuition, do we have a lot of non-resident students? Like what is our,
So currently we have about 8.
and is that split out between elementary, middle and high school, or is it
No.
concentrated somewhere?
Mostly middle and high school.
Middle and high
Yeah.
school? Thanks. All right, so thank you, Mr. Cruz. Thank you, Mr. Day. And we're going to continue with the committee reports. Did education meet? We heard a bit that it was a long meeting.
Start and then I'll come in afterwards.
Sorry about that. On the agenda tonight is policy 5722, student journalism. It's our first reading. We look through it just to make sure from sort of like a legal standpoint, not to steal your thunder, Mr. Roberts, that the students were protected in all regards in that policy. There are quite a few curriculum revisions on tonight's agenda, and that is resolution. It's under education. Sorry, I just want to make sure it's resolution number 12. And we talked about Ms. Shipper's presentation. We just said that she was going to present. We are looking to, we renewed Edmentum Exact Path, which is the companion program for MAP. And just to sort of go out of order, Dr. Miller was able to take our MAP growth data and show a pretty consistent correlation with those scores and the NJSLA scores, which is sort of what he's been saying this whole time. And we have Start Strong that New Jersey is requiring again. That's going to be September 19th through, see, and I just had it up here and oh no, it's right here. Sorry, in big font. No, but I'm sure Dr. Miller wants to yell it out right now. Anyway, Start Strong is going to be starting September 19th. But Dr. Miller has not given up yet, and he is still working on the state of New Jersey to show them that map growth testing is much more effective in showing what our students' strengths and weaknesses are. So what he's trying to do is convince the state of New Jersey that that's what we should use instead of Start Strong.
Because Start Strong actually doesn't even measure ability and measures prerequisite skills.
Prerequisite skills, right, exactly. That students haven't worked on in 3 months. SGOs are going to be again this year. We're going back to MSGPs because now we have data from last year for teachers. Let's see. We talked about curriculum revisions. On the agenda tonight is also Marzano's evaluation instrument for teachers, principals, and supervisors. During committee, we sort of talked about maybe is there something a little bit better that we can look for in for next year to look at a June agenda for. And that way we can offer PD for teachers in advance prior.
And that
to
would
the
be to replace Marzano?
That would be to replace Marzano, yeah. New teacher orientation, you already talked about that. Also on the agenda is a change in the calendar. And I forgot to write down what resolution it was, so somebody jump in when you find it. Change in the calendar to be closed for Juneteenth. New Jersey is observing Juneteenth on June 16th. And I don't know the exact reason why. I can only assume is that a lot of schools either get out right before that or have their graduations either that, Monday or Tuesday after. So that's the proposed date to close school. Now, in discussion in committee, we talked about, do we observe, close school, come back Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the next week, and then graduation is that Thursday? Or do we keep school open and find extensive and grade appropriate curriculum for each grade to do surrounding around Juneteenth and make it like a celebration, which it is, which is why it's a federal holiday. So, I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. It's resolution number 8. Thank you. So, I think that's something that we should sort of talk about now, prior to moving the resolutions. Mr. Walker, what were I know you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I thought we were going to call that out for separate vote and discussion. Well, I thought that was our agreement. So
We can do that.
because I think you're absolutely right in that this is something that needs to be discussed, but I'd rather pull it out separately.
We'll do it then. Cool.
As far as the just to make sure we're on everyone kind of hearing this is on the same page. We did talk about the idea of possibly replacing the Marzano, but it couldn't be any more of an infancy stage in this. And I don't want anyone to think that this is definitely going to happen because it's probably much more likely that it won't. But we did talk about that. And then the third thing that was, discussed at the meeting, and I want to bring it up because, I want to make sure that practices that aren't right are fixed. And, sometimes you have to acknowledge that they happen before this, before you move forward. So I was uneasy when I learned that at the education committee meeting that before the committee had a chance to review the proposed changes to the curriculum, and before the board had a chance to vote yes or vote no on those changes, the newly revised curriculum was put onto the website as if as if the board had voted yes, right? So I just think it's really important to understand just how, first of all, how limited our powers as board members are. Like our first power is to hire a superintendent. I think we came up aces. Our second power is to evaluate said superintendent, and we'll do that, in May or June. And then our tertiary power is simply that, we vote yes or no and ask the right questions based on anything that the superintendent puts on the agenda. And likewise, it's the job of the district to put things on the agenda and then to sell them to us or explain the rationale to us, so that we vote yes, or perhaps we vote no, or we're given the opportunity to ask the right questions. So I was really, disheartened that this happened, and I know it's already been fixed. I'm going to say that right now. I saw that this practice is fixed. I believe that it'll stay fixed. But I have a feeling this is something that's been happening for probably a lot longer than we think. And it's something that, this is the second time now we had with the, people starting the DEI work before the board had voted yes to it. And I'm okay with the fact that we're having this DEI work, but my contention was that nothing should start without the board approving it first. That's kind of how this works. So I want to make sure we just kind of are really careful as a board to make sure that we're vigilant on that, because it's really not a practice we can allow to continue. But I do know that the superintendent and the other district employees have fixed it. I've seen that there's practices in place now that are going to fix it, but I just want to make sure it stays fixed.
I don't disagree with you, Mr. Walker. Before the record, we did approve the DEI work well before we sought out a third party to sort of guide us the next steps.
Sarah, I'm talking about the DEI stipendary work, the stipends.
Yes. Okay. That's not what you said. You said the DEI work.
Okay, but
okay. No, I understand.
And that's all.
That was it for education.
Let me just clarify. Resolution number 8 in regard to the calendar, are we pulling that for a separate vote? Okay. And, all right, so that's Education Committee. Are there any other questions or comments regarding Education Committee? Okay, Athletics, Mrs. Prisco.
Sure. Thank you, Mrs. Freshy. So we did meet last week. Fall sports are underway. Everything was up and running as of August 22nd. Our Verona High School football team had its first game on this past Friday evening at home, and they did win that season opener. So congratulations and best wishes to all our athletes and our band, all our members of the community that participate in any of the fall sports. We discussed field usage with coming up with some policies around that for outside vendors. We've also discussed, we're still in the initial discussions regarding field cameras in certain areas, regarding vandalism. So we're working on that. Thank you, Mrs. Di Giuseppe, to speaking on the Fall Leadership Summit that happens at West Essex. That happens 3 times a year. So this was our fall students that attended. Let's see, I believe we have 2 field trips. So on September 24th, our cross-country team, our boys team, approximately 15 student athletes will be attending the Great Adventure Wild Safari International Race, and they will race in the morning throughout the park. And then on September 20th and October 3rd, Miss Smith from HBW will be taking her students at HBW to the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York City. So there will be 2 dates for that. And I think, did I miss anything?
Covered everything. The one thing that Ms. Palmarezzi did want to impress to us, that she was really trying to tighten up the field usage forms. So there's been times where forms haven't been filled out correctly. Another team would show up and there's somebody on the field already. So they want to really keep that tightened up, so we know who's using what fields and when, and it helps us with insurance coverage and liability and vulnerability of having anything happen that we don't know about or have not approved.
And I'll go one step further to Mr. Martin, I'm sorry, and also wanted me to remind the board and the community that there's new signage at all of our fields, that it is dawn to dusk. No one on the field after dusk, with the exception of the lighted fields in the track.
Thank
I
you.
have a quick question, and I know Ms. Prisco, I had forwarded an email from a community member regarding JV and varsity field hockey and field usage, or that you guys did talk about that as part of your field usage. Okay.
Yes, we did. So, and just correct me if I'm wrong on this, but our lower field, if field hockey, what they were requesting was to use our field. If we were to, the field is not lined for field hockey. So if we were to line for field hockey at our facilities, then the warranty on those fields would be void. So that
And the
is-
reason for that is field hockey didn't exist when we created that field. So when you have your field installed, you tell them what sports are going to be on it. It gets lined for those specific sports, and the warranty is for those specific sports. If you change the field and relined, you null and void all our warranties. So they do play up at Centennial Field. And for now, because it
Right.
would,
Right, and I
it
know
would
because we have
jeopardize-
so many girls that have
Yep.
come up now since the program was
They want it.
new a few
Yep.
years ago. It's really at a premium because then they're also competing with the younger kids playing as well
Correct.
as soccer.
so I do want to
Right.
get back. I want to say we're 6 years into it. I would have to look.
So it's another,
It's another.
6 years
it's-
into the turf field. You have another 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
another, there's
a while.
significant time.
Go back to install it and negotiate. Want to reline it.
That
we
is
get a
something,
separate one.
yeah, so we could go back to Mrs. Palmarezzi and ask her to follow up with the installation on that. And also, I don't know if she did get back to the parent who posed the question. So maybe we'll just follow up that as well, just so there's a response to that. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Prisco. Facilities, did that meet? And I think a lot of it must have gotten covered with Mr. Natural. So is there anything to add to that?
I have lots to add to it. So, yeah, thank you, Mr. Natural, for your report. I think, yeah, he's doing a wonderful job leading the team over the summer, and I was very happy to see some of the work we talked about at the meeting, but it was nice to see up in lights and the pictures for the public. Mr. Cruz had mentioned about our asset management type system, tracking system that we're getting set up and ready to rock and roll with that. The playground surfacing, I think everybody's aware we had some challenges with the playground surfacing, the way it was installed. So there was negotiations with the folks that installed it for us, and they've agreed to repair it and extended the warranty. So we have that to cover it. So they'll do the repairs, and then we'll have a warranty that will make sure that is, how long that warranty? Is that for another year? Okay, that's what I thought. We also put RFPs out for the new architect of record. So that's Mr. Cruz is working on that. So we have that with Mr. Natural. So interviews will be going through that with a new architect of record. Retaining wall on Forest Avenue. This has been a big topic of discussion. As you all know, and I don't know how often you guys go to Forest Avenue fields, but we have the retaining wall that's by the baseball fields that's sort of been leaning more and more, the water damage with the trees and things behind it. So I know there's a cone there to advise people of the wall and some of the challenges that the wall is having at this point. And so we basically got some quotes. So there's a couple of ways to go. There's a way you can fully repair the concrete, or you can go another repairing way of using keystone retaining wall blocks. So Mr. Natural and Mr. Cruz are going to be discussing on the options and the best way to go. We do have the 3 quotes, and we're going to be finalizing which way to go with that project. The issue is, the timing, when to do that, those kind of things. So we'll have to sort through that. Yeah.
They range.
There's a range. Yeah. So we found the keystone retaining wall method is the most cost effective, and it might be the easiest to repair and replace. So those are things that we're looking at. So we're happy to share those quotes with you, Ms. Prisco. So, the other item is during the annual, inspection of rooms, they go through all the rooms, validate, and every room's in, tip-top shape. Well, they did find in 5 classrooms, there were some crack tiles. So crack tiles, because they're made out of asbestos, concerning, right? So immediately, the maintenance team notified Mr. Natural, and they ended up starting the abatement process for those 5 rooms. So those 5 rooms are being abated, the environmental teams are all notified, and state contractor was notified, so we'll make sure those rooms, I'm not sure, I didn't get an update from Mr. Naturel, is the abatement work being completed or almost completed?
So the abatement is completely done. Air sample tests was complete, and we're good to go. So actually this week they started doing the installation of the floors.
Okay, great. That's good to know. Thank you so much.
Floor tiles, yeah. So this is the old 9x9 asbestos flooring that is all over the district. So
Okay,
And
Good.
just to confirm, that's coming out of our maintenance reserve because this is an unbudgeted item.
that is correct.
Okay.
Yes, and it's on the agenda in the finance section.
and then the last thing we had was that our facilities were used this summer for a movie. It's very exciting, and so hopefully you might see Verona up in lights. So, and that's about it. That's all I had for the report. Any questions?
I just wanted to echo Mr. Day that Mr. Naturale is doing an absolute incredible job. He's an out of the box thinker. He's always looking for efficiencies. He's always looking for the least expensive, most effective and best quality way to fix an issue. And he's transparent and he's working incredibly hard, and so glad that we have him. I know he's not here anymore, but I really wanted to thank him also for his work. How well he's been collaborating with Mr. Molinaro from the township, really working well together, collaborating well together. And, that's exactly what we want to see.
Excellent, thank you. So that concludes our committee reports. So at this point, we're going to open to public comment on agenda action items. So if anybody has any comment on any of the resolutions that we'll be voting upon tonight, now would be the time to come to the podium. And I see, none. So we are going to close public comment session. And are there any discussion items from the board?
Yes, real quick, Mrs. Droppy. I mean, Mrs. Freshy, I'm so sorry. I just want to say good luck to all our staff, our administrators, and our students on coming back to school on Wednesday, Thursday. Teachers, staff comes back Wednesday. Right? Yeah, so Tuesday. Okay, well, when everyone comes back, I just want to wish everyone good luck and a successful and healthy and happy school year.
Thank you. So at this point, we're going to do a roll call to vote on resolutions. And we need a
Do the
motion.
conversation on the one we
That's
pulled
what I'm gonna
first
do.
or
I'm gonna-
afterwards? Oh, move them first. Okay.
So
First.
I
or
need a
motion?
resolution to move 1 through 40.
So
And we,
moved.
oh, I was going to say, and we're going to pull number 8 to be discussed and voted upon separately.
So moved again.
So moved by Mr. Day, and I need a second.
Oh, second.
Second by Mrs. Drappi. And let's do the discussion on number 8 first. So do you want to open that up, Mr. Walker?
Yeah. So I could see both sides of this argument, like in whatever way that, the board goes in this, like, I get it, let me preface it with that. I think, in relation or in regards to Juneteenth, there's 2 things that I want. I want kids in the classroom. I've always wanted kids to be in the classroom, but I also want the ideals of this holiday, celebrated. Now, under option 1, if we give the kids off this day, neither of these outcomes, comes to fruition. The kids are going to be home, and I don't believe that very many kids in Verona on this day off home are going to have any opportunity or are going to be actively looking to kind of embrace the ideals of this particular holiday or the themes associated with it. If we keep the building open for students on this particular day, I believe kids will be in the place where they do belong, which is school. And I think now we're giving them an authentic opportunity. And it doesn't have to be every single period of every single day. But some content on that day, age appropriate, grade appropriate, for them to learn about the ideals of this holiday and the themes surrounding it. And I think, kids will benefit a lot more, and the spirit of this holiday will benefit a lot more if we present them this opportunity. And then I guess one thing to augment this point is that, we just were listened to a fairly extensive DEI presentation and read the report. And that report was with the calendar where we were going to be on that day. That wasn't something that came up once, as far as, this is something that we recommend you consider being off. So, whatever way the board votes on it, but I'd like to see kids in the room, and I'd like to see the school put something together, or schools put something together to teach kids about this holiday on this particular day.
Are there any other inputs onto this?
Well, I was curious, what are other districts doing in there? Have we done a poll on that about other districts? I mean, I was just curious.
Not a formal poll, but there's quite a few Essex County districts that are giving Juneteenth. Morris County, not so much. It really, it's county
So they're giving
dependent.
the day off.
Day off, yeah. Well, yeah, let me preface that by saying many schools are starting earlier in the year. So they're starting in the end of August and they're already closed by Juneteenth. That's the other caveat, that school districts that are opening in August have already closed for the year by the time Juneteenth rolls around.
Because the reason why I bring that question up, every year we have a challenge because we have to have the minimum number of days, and we try to figure out when to do graduation and things like that. And I know we got rid of the winter break because we did a sort of a poll with the folks in the town, and they decided we'd rather be out earlier in the summer than, push it forward. So this just tacks another day. And, maybe the idea of having some kind of session in your homeroom and then go through a full day on Juneteenth, but you have, we have, like Mr. Walker said, some kind of session about Juneteenth, but have that school day so schools get out earlier as opposed to pushing another day. And then in June, potentially you could have heat. Even though we have air conditioning now, you have those kind of things too. So again, I was just curious what other districts are doing.
Ms. Prisco?
Looking at the calendar prior to the change, I'm for what Mr. Walker said, having the students in the classroom as well. But looking at the calendar, we're here on November 8th for election day for only half a day. And if we're going to me personally, if we're going to remove a day from the calendar, I would prefer the students not be in the buildings at all on November 8th and make that day a full day, because we have people coming in and out of our buildings for election day. And that's always a problem every year with our calendar. If we don't touch anything, I agree with Mr. Waka. I believe that a child will get more out of what that day means by being in the classroom and having something in the curriculum for that day. That's.
Mrs.
And I
Stratton?
know in the spring, we did have election day where there were no students in the building, right? Then we pulled.
Yeah, I thought it was that in the
June.
past that it might have been a professional development, like half day with no students.
Because I wasn't here last year, I know that the Verona schools were closed on, I think it was June 10th or whatever election day was in June, the primary day. The governor's office and the Department of Education encouraged districts to go all virtual on that day if you have elections in your school. I don't know that we went virtual, or did we
We
just
did.
have the day off?
Yeah,
We
did.
had an extra snow day.
An extra snow day, okay.
Yeah.
My only concern with November 8th is that, and again, I'm new here, so I don't know the culture. I know in my previous district, if we were to close on the 8th and have the 10th and the 11th also closed, many parents would opt to take their kids out of school for the whole week and we
Yeah.
lose instruction that way. But I understand the concern with people in the building, especially that the law changed and we can't have police officers. I did speak to the administrators yesterday about potentially hiring some security guards that can stand outside the polling areas in the school to prevent people from entering. So I'm looking into that. I don't know the cost of that. We've not had to do that before, but that would certainly be an option if we could procure them.
Yeah, I think to that point too, like there's really are like, there's the big ticket elections where the president's involved or gubernatorial where you could expect a really high turnout. And then there's other elections where you really can't expect that, where, we know it's gonna be much lower for town council or for an election where there's not any big ticket items. So I think in some ways you kind of almost forced to look at the actual election to determine, do we need to close schools or do we not need to close schools? And that might change each particular year. But I think to your first point, like if is it an either or, like there's the either or, is it Juneteenth or the election, or is it just the kind of thing where we're going to look to if we choose to do this, keep Juneteenth with some kind of curriculum, themed approach towards it, and then also have a separate discussion about the election for either for our policy for all elections moving forward, or just for, because how many elections are there now? There's November, then there's sometimes May or June, right? There's a couple of them.
Sometimes you have the,
Yeah.
the council election.
Then if that might be 3 days right there that it's hard to accommodate all those different days.
Would we consider surveying the public what they think we should do for Juneteenth? I mean, full disclosure, the irony of an all-white board making a decision about Juneteenth hasn't escaped me. So, it has a different meaning for me than it does, for someone who is Black. I want to celebrate it as well, but it is a different meaning for me than it is for somebody else. So I wonder if we shouldn't survey and see what the public thinks, because yeah, we should be celebrating. It should be a day off to celebrate, just like July 4th. And I agree with that, but I agree with Mr. Waka that I think we should have a celebration in school also, that the kids should be learning about it, exactly what happened, why we celebrate it, why it's a federal holiday, maybe even an assembly. Not that that's a fix-all by any means, but just they need to learn about it.
I think part of it, like, I'm not sure it's ironic, like we're board members and we have to vote on a calendar, and that's what we have to do. But what do we know about our kids in Verona, especially those of that like you and I that have kids in the system? I love my son to death, but if you give him a day off, he's not looking to like, Dad, what can I read to learn more? But he's looking to play Madden football or something, and it's almost a day of where there could have been something productive. Now there's nothing productive as far as academics. And I think it's the kind of thing too, where just because we make a decision for the 2022-23 year, doesn't mean we're married to it every other year.
Right. Right. No, I agree with that.
And I think that, what we do is, elected board members, we're elected to make decisions that we think puts our kids in our district in the best possible position. We know that an issue like that, if we survey it, we're not going to get 100% either way. And now we might be just
Yeah, you open
creating
it up
a
to a different
divisive
can of
issue
worms.
that, I think we should trust that, we're making a decision that we think's what's in the best interest. And it's the kind of thing that if we're wrong, it doesn't mean it has to always be that way moving forward.
Okay. So the way it reads is that the board approved based on the recommendation of the superintendent, the attached revised 2022-23 district school calendar.
That's the only revision on there.
Right, so
was-
that's the only revision.
Yeah.
So if the board wants to have that day as an in-school event where we teach about Juneteenth and inform our students the meaning, because it's relatively new in this country
Yeah,
that we're
it is relatively
celebrating
new.
Juneteenth, then you would vote no on that.
Right, and it's certainly not in our history books or programs. It might be in the new
I mean,
TCI
yeah,
program.
Yeah,
I would
Yeah.
hope so, but
Yeah, so to
Yeah.
clarify, a vote of yes would mean
We're changing.
you
it.
would like
Right,
the day
we're
off. and
giving
we're
it a
gonna
day
change
off
it. A
and-
vote of no would
Would mean
mean
we're
that we are
open.
going to have it
Yes.
open and have
Yes.
some kind of something infused into the
Yes.
curriculum for that day.
And a vote of yes doesn't change graduation.
Right.
It just gives us 3 snow days instead of 4.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah, if we could put to, if after the vote, like if it votes no, if there's somewhere in the notes to put, it's with the idea that there's going to be some kind of curricular content with the themes of Juneteenth.
Yeah.
That's why the vote was voted no.
Right, so I think we're ready to move forward to vote.
Okay.
So
Do we have to move 8 separately?
that's what I was gonna ask Mr. Robert.
You moved all of them, so
We
you'll
vote
just
on
gonna
those.
vote on 1 to 40 without
Without
8,
eight.
and then 8 separately. You don't need a separate motion.
Okay, so Mr. Cruz, can you please read the roll to vote on number 1 through 40 excluding number 8?
Yes. So resolution 1 to 40 excluding number 8, Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mrs. Drappi,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mrs. Freshy.
Yes.
We have quorum, motion passed on 1 through 40 excluding resolution number 8.
Okay, and then we'll vote on resolution number 8 independently. Mr. Cruz, can you please read the roll for the vote on number 8?
Mr. Walker,
No.
Mr. Day,
No.
Mrs. Drappi,
No.
Mrs. Prisco,
No.
Mrs. Freshy.
No.
Motion failed.
Okay. Then we do have addendum items. So I need a motion to move addenda resolutions number 1 through 4. Moved by Mrs. Prisco,
Second.
second by Mrs. Drappi. And is there any discussion on 1 through 4? If not, I am going to ask Mr. Cruz to please read the roll to vote on those addenda resolutions.
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mrs. Drappi,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mrs. Freshy.
Yes.
Motion passed. Thank
Okay, thank you very much. And then lastly, on our agenda, we are going to open up the podium to public comments on any topics at all. So anybody who wants to approach the podium, please state your name, your address, and there's a 3-minute limit. Thank you.
Denise Frizella, 130 Personette Avenue in Verona. Actually, Chris, I was,
Excuse- Ms. Frizella, one second. Elton, is the microphone on there?
did I was good,
Oh.
okay. Chris, I was actually really happy when you mentioned that they, about the curriculum that was put on the website before the board voted. I'm actually up here to talk about policy 7523, which is the school district provided technology services to students policy. This policy had a revision that had a first read on July 19th. As of today, there has been no second reading of this policy, and this policy hasn't been voted on by the board to be accepted. If you look on the board policy guidelines right now, the old policy or the current policy is still there, not the revised policy. This is important because on August 12th, we received an email saying that all students would now be required to use district-provided Chromebooks, which is fine. I actually support that program 100%. I think it's a great asset to our students. However, the policy also said that these were mandatory for the completion of classroom curriculum, which essentially made them the equivalent of a textbook or lab equipment, something that a student requires in order to learn, right? So then on August 15th, I received an email about distribution of Chromebooks to students in HPW and the Verona High School. As part of this distribution, there was a mandatory insurance fee of $25 per student, not per family, not per student. I have a problem with that. When you make something mandatory for the completion of classroom curriculum and then charge for it, whether it's an insurance policy, quote unquote, or to actually hold the item, to have the item, it's like charging for a textbook, which is what you do in college. Trust me, I have lots of them from law school. And also the policy is the old policy still. So why are we now requiring students to adhere to the new policy that you as a board has not even voted on? It's not the policy. Also, this is important because there was no information on any of these emails about what to do if you were experiencing financial hardship and you could not pay $25 to give your student a Chromebook so they can access their education. Nothing. There wasn't even a line saying, hey, can you reach out to the principal if this is a problem for you? I mean, I know people in Verona that have 4 children between the middle school and the high school. And that's $100. That's 2 weeks before school starts, which is when this policy was, 3 weeks before school start was when this policy was first sprung upon the community. I bought my own daughter a new Chromebook in June when they were on clearance. That's now gonna sit in her room and not be used. So the communication of this policy was extremely poorly done. And then, just so people understand what we're talking about in terms of money, there were about 1,400 students between the middle school and the high school. That's $35,000 that's being collected from the community each year for an insurance fee. Where is this money going? Who's in charge of distributing this money? Who decides how this money is spent? And at what point do we say we have enough in the insurance fund to not charge this fee anymore? The district tried something similar to this last year, I remember, and it was pulled back almost immediately. So they've had an entire year to change the policy, to correct the program, to roll it out correctly, to make sure parents were aware. And they didn't do it. They waited until July to bring forth a new policy. And then, like I said, the board hasn't even approved this policy yet. I mean, and then there is also a quagmire legally of if you can charge for mandatory required classroom curriculum items. There's some case law about it. I won't go into it. I'm sure your attorney is well versed in it. So I think that this program, although well-intentioned, and I would love to see it implemented next year, should be pulled back. Money should be returned to parents who have already paid the fee. And if they wish to provide either if you wish to provide students with mandatory Chromebooks, you make the insurance fee optional, which would take care of pretty much all your issues, or you implement the policy next year. So I thank you for your listening. Have a
Thank you for
great night.
bringing the points public.
And so what, I guess it brings the first question up, like, and I wouldn't say one part's more important than the other, but if we were aware that a kid couldn't pay the fee, obviously they need this Chromebook. What's Verona doing?
So 2 things. As I mentioned earlier regarding free reduced lunch, we do waive any fees in the district when a student qualifies for free and reduced lunch. That's one. The other point that Superintendent Giuseppe actually shared is that any family with more than 2 students will cap the fee at $50. So those are 2 things that are being provided. And the other option, if at this time is a hardship for any families to actually pay the fee at this time, we're allowing for the payments to actually be done later in the fall. So giving them until October or November.
Have to come to you to know that information, or the parents have to come to us, or is there any way we might want to how do we disinformate? How do we get that parents that information?
So that's actually already
Oh,
being communicated by the administration. So
Yeah.
so the school principal already has the authority to actually make the arrangement for that. So I'm not sure.
And I actually have in my welcome back letter that's going out tomorrow, instructions if family, just to reiterate, if you have struggles to contact me and that we have a $25 per student to pay for the insurance to cover the cost of if the Chromebooks break, and they do regularly, or they get spilled on, et cetera. And it's a $50 family maximum. So
Oh,
no
so if you have
family is
multiple
spending,
children.
multiple children, the most, the
Okay.
district will pick up the difference between, if you have 4 children, you're still paying $50 if you have,
Total.
yeah, total.
And I know at the last ed committee meeting, we talked about, sometimes we weren't certain policies, we weren't sure when they were adopted or when, because it was just difficult to read the way things were currently worded with the date. So if we could look into what we have on record as far as the first reading and
So
second reading and approval.
The first reading of this policy was the last meeting. So okay, so it should have been on this one. And the way the policy reads right now, Oh.
So I'm confused because when I got the electronic copy over the weekend, that policy was on here to be for
Oh,
approved
I
tonight.
wonder if it got erased when we added on their journalism policy.
It may have, because it was on there, I know. I was waiting to send out my letter.
If you just disseminate it to all the board members and review it, you can move it as new business tonight on second.
Oh,
Oh.
okay. Yeah, because it was on the agenda.
Well, I would like
was.
to-
I feel like I'm going
I mean,
crazy.
now that Ms. Rosella brought this up, I mean, because then it does say, the parent or student shall be responsible to reimburse the school district the cost of any technology device that is lost, damaged beyond reasonable use or beyond its value, abandoned, missing, stolen, or cannot be returned. But then we still pay the $25 insurance fee.
That's
Isn't that
the-
what insurance is for?
The insurance is for damage. If it's lost, the insurance does not cover it.
Damage beyond reasonable use beyond its value? Oh,
Yeah,
like,
no, the
like
insurance
if the
will
screen
cover.
is
Yeah,
cracked and you
yeah.
can't use it,
Or
okay.
if someone spills a Coke
and
onto
it's
the,
the heart and the
yeah,
hardware is
yeah,
damaged.
yeah.
Oh, okay. So, right, because we don't want to put in the policy, we're not going to put a cost because that cost is subject to change, right?
but in our handbook, in the handbook that's associated that went out, it does explain the cost, the current cost. As a matter of fact, the original cost was $30, and Mr. Balaj found a less expensive insurance with similar or same coverage.
Okay.
So it went from 30 to 25.
So if I understand right, that $25 is sort of like subsidizes like for the families that can't afford it or that don't, that are below an income level that they would not have to pay for it?
So the 25 actually covers the
Individual.
direct costs to the insurance company.
Okay.
So unlike I think in prior years, or the way that it was being designed was previously that it was going to be a fund. But now we're not doing that. We're actually getting the provider to actually insure the Chromebooks and then also provide the coverage for the entire school year.
So that money goes directly to the insurance
So,
company.
so it goes directly to that, and then also it covers like chargers and
Right.
the lost charges and et cetera. So if a student actually loses a charger, which happens a lot, and that actually covers the cost of those replacement of
Charger's about $25 to replace on its own.
correct.
And let me just ask one more question, and you might be able to answer it. In something like this, should the insurance fee be optional? Would this something that similar to like when your student goes to college, you need to have medical coverage, you need to have insurance. And if you could show that you have insurance that would cover it, the college allows you to opt out. But if not, you have to accept their policy. So if we, in theory, had the insurance optional and parents could show what would be covered on their homeowners, if a student damages or loses a computer, would the parent be able to cover that on their own homeowner's insurance? Where they do have the option to opt out of 25, but then you're going to put the claim on your own insurance or cover the cost out of your own pocket.
It's worth investigating.
So yeah, I guess that'll be a discussion that we could continue having regarding if we want to offer that option. I think to that example, a lot of deductibles are like $500,
Yeah,
$1,000. Chromebook actually
300.
costs about $400.
Yeah.
So if we provide families the option of actually opting into insurance plan, paying the $25, as opposed to a damage actually happens and a repair could cost anywhere from $100 to even the price of the actual Chromebook. So it's kind of like taking the risk, and then the cost of actually paying for the insurance is about $2 a month. So if we put it on kind of like expanding it throughout the calendar year, it's a small cost for insurance. So it's like less than a price of coffee. To put it in.
Yeah, I think we also understand who were our clients, right? Like kids drop things. That's just what they do.
Mhm.
I understand the rationale, but I also understand the idea that, like, you know, I was happy to hear that you know, we're going to communicate that if there's a hardship, you know, there's certain people, that looks like it's coming out very soon, as the superintendent said. So, you know, that part of it looks like, you know, it may have been helpful to have that earlier, but you know, we're at least going to get to this end result what we want. And then with the actual readings, I do think that, you know, we just got to be mindful of, you know, the first and second readings and when we make things official. Because I get the point of this went out before perhaps the second reading occurred. But you know, if we fix these kind of problems, and you're new, I'm not saying it's on you,
No,
Ben.
no, it was on there.
Like,
I really,
I
I
think that
I
once we
accept the responsibility.
no, I'm not even pointing a finger. I think that once we all get into the habit of kind of just making it a priority, then I think it becomes just the habit that we do, and these things don't happen again.
Well, yeah, I think, and you know, Mr. Cruz and I share a secretary. I think the habit needs to be, if it was first reading in June, it should be second reading in July automatically. And you know, that's been my habit prior. I do want to say that I do have experience with optional insurance for Chromebooks. For the last school year in my former district, we made that optional, and it really was a disaster. Kids were breaking Chromebooks all over the place, and parents that couldn't come up with $300 quickly or didn't. It was very difficult for us to provide loaners. I don't know if it's the same situation here. I'm assuming it's a similar situation where, you know, 1 or 2 loaners we have, but you know, every student from grade 5 through 12, that's a lot of students that have an opportunity to drop and et cetera, and they do. So it was difficult to purchase replacements when we were waiting for parents to give us a check for $300.
Look at them shipped on time, right? Like that's part of
Yes.
it.
Let me clarify too. So, Mr. Roberts, you're saying, yeah, reiterate that to me,
As
please.
new business, can you hear me? As new business, we need a motion and a second to approve policy 7523 on second reading.
So moved. Yeah, 70, that's it. Mhm. Second.
So, other discussion.
slate of policies if we're going to do what we
Yeah, because that's what I was gonna say. There was a whole slate of them.
Let me read those out.
Yeah, let's go that way.
So for second reading, it would be 0143.2, high school student representative to the Board of Education. They
Yeah,
were all
they
on.
were
I
all
know.
in there.
0163 quorum. 2415 Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. 5513 Care of School Property. We already said 7523. And then a companion regulation of 5513, which is also care of school property.
These are second readings or?
These are
first
second
readings?
These are
readings.
second,
These
are
yeah,
second
because
readings.
in
Yeah.
the electronic,
Yeah.
Yeah.
one that packet that we got over the weekend, these were all in there. And I had asked about specifically, some of these
Right, right.
policies. And that's why I was like surprised when, Mrs. Brazilla came up and said that it wasn't in the. Oh, I have a printout that she gave me and it wasn't in here, but it was in our electronic packet and that's.
Correct. Something happened in producing the agenda. We did table last in first reading student journalism and school and facility names. And that's why student journalism was a first reading. Yeah,
Okay.
thank
So
you.
we have a motion and we have a second, and are there any discussion on any of these other policies or regulations? No. So Mr. Cruz, can you please do a roll call to vote on those?
Mr. Walker,
I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mrs. Drappi,
I might have to abstain too, because I'm still looking for those other policies and I don't remember talking about them. The student journalism one, we definitely talked about this last meeting. And then the student representative one, we've talked about it at length as well. And I know we most, but the other ones I don't remember. I don't remember talking about any of those. So I don't know that I can vote on them right now. I'd like to look at them first.
So
I'm sorry.
abstain? Yes,
Yeah,
abstain.
abstaining.
Mrs. Prisco?
Mrs. Prisco
Yes.
and Mrs. Freshy.
Yes.
We have quorum. Motion passed.
So with that, I think we're done. Are we good? Yep. Any
Okay,
other
with
public
the
comment?
new-
Okay, so thank you for that. And our next meeting is Tuesday, September 13th, beginning with our confidential session at 6 PM with the 7 PM public session in the Learning Commons at the high school. And I need a motion to adjourn the meeting. Moved by Mrs. Prisco. Second by Mr. Day. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Walk, I need a verbal. Thank you. Thank you. And the meeting is adjourned. It's 9:29 and every